Welcome to our newest episode of the Lebanese Physicians Podcast. And last time we did an episode on medical training in Germany. And today, actually, we decided to do one on medical training in the UK. We will call The Road to Medical Training in the United Kingdom. And with us is Dr. Violeta Yammine, who basically has lived in a lot of places. She was born and raised in Venezuela, did her high school there, then moved to Beirut, Lebanon, where she did her bachelor's in biology and also in philosophy. Violeta, you can correct me, philosophy at the American University of Beirut, and then subsequently actually moved to Cyprus, where she did her medical school there at the St. George's University of London affiliated medical school. Actually spent a year in the United States in Baltimore with the University of Maryland affiliate hospital for her third year of medical school, and then finished the medical school in Cyprus. And currently, she is talking to us from her quarantine at her apartment in the UK, where she will be joining Oxford affiliated hospitals as a junior physician. That's a new term for the UK, which we just learned, in general medicine. And our co-host will be Dr. Elie Ghabi, who actually is born and raised in Lebanon, did his medical school at the University of Baltimore, and currently relocated to Baltimore, where he is a postdoctoral fellow at Johns Hopkins University in the Department of Surgery, studying pancreatic cancer. Welcome to both of you to the podcast.
Thank you.
So Violeta, you've got an interesting history. And,
sorry for that intro.
And so tell us about your story first. I mean, before we start, like you went from Venezuela to Lebanon to Cyprus to the UK. So how did this come about?
Yeah, so being born in Venezuela, both of my parents are Lebanese. So when I finished my high school, I decided to go study in Lebanon. And I did both of my undergrads there. I did a bachelor in biology and a bachelor in philosophy at AUB. However, unfortunately, I was not accepted for medical school there. So I started to look options outside of Lebanon, and Cyprus was actually quite a common option amongst AUB medical, like pre-med students. I went to Cyprus for my interview with the medical school and to also tour the university. And I was able to shadow a couple of classes, and that made me fall in love, obviously, with med school and with the university in Cyprus. And so I decided to take the offer. And I moved there back in 2016. I did my first 2 years there. I then did my third year of medical school, which is the clinical rotation years in Baltimore, Maryland. I did a couple of rotations as well for fourth year medical school there. Then I came back to Cyprus. The pandemic hit in early 2020. So some of our rotations at the end of the year had to be canceled. And a year later, I'm now in the UK.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
So Violeta, just let me ask a quick question. Since you were researching medical schools both in Lebanon and elsewhere, why choose a medical school in Cyprus in particular?
First of all, it was so close to Lebanon that obviously that's a selling point for us Lebanese. Second, it was actually quite a common option amongst the AUB students. I knew that many of them were already there in Cyprus. So it was comforting knowing that I would be going to a place where there are people with similar stories than me. So I wouldn't be, let's say, the odd one out, and I can relate to some people. When I came here, when I went to Cyprus, for the interview, I love the country. I love the city. You know, it has a really good quality of life. It's not that expensive. So I went for it. Yeah.
And so basically, you were in Cyprus, you did in medical school, and what prompted you to apply to the United Kingdom? I guess potentially it could be the affiliation of your medical school with the UK. But so was that what prompted you to apply to the UK, or did you consider applying to other places at the same time?
Exactly. So because we receive a British medical degree, our application pathway for the UK to become junior doctors in the UK, it's actually really, really smooth, especially when you compare it to students that are coming from non-British medical schools. Our application is actually relatively free. You don't have to pay to apply. You just have to pay to maybe translate some documents, depending on where your undergrad university was at. But the application in and of itself is actually free. It's a very smooth process. And because the university is a British university, they have close ties to the application center in the United Kingdom. And whatever question we have about the application or anything else, we just ask them, they ask the UK, and they let us know. So that's really what makes all the students almost at my university apply to the UK, and that's where the majority of students end up post-graduation.
So basically similar to like when you're at AUB in Lebanon or even other universities, everybody sort of applies to the US just as
exactly.
Yeah.
And when one person does something, it sets also the tone for the others, because then when you struggle with something and then you can teach let's say the students that are younger than you, and they teach the others, and so it becomes a trend where year by year the application pathway just becomes much easier for us, especially since 2019, that it was fully open for students that do not have a British or European citizenship to apply. Prior to that, it was a different process. Yeah.
Okay.
And well, you also asked if I looked into other places.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So lots of students as well from my university also applied to the US. And that is something that I'm also looking at. I've been studying for my steps, doing the whole application process. So most of the students from my university end up either in the US or in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah.
You explained the application process quite in a lot of detail, and thank you for that. But I guess the burning question is, how much would it cost to apply to the UK? So if you can briefly just break down the expenses of the whole process of applying, and
Yeah.
if you have to go back and forth.
So to the UK, to be completely honest with you, I only had to pay to convert my undergraduate degrees from an American GPA system to a UK point system. And you do that with an external company. It's not related to the UK. I paid for that, which was a couple $100, and that's all I had to pay. Unlike the US, you do not pay to apply for a specific number of programs. So that's that's a selling point, let's say, for the UK application. Now, because I graduated from a British medical school, I have what is called the provisional registration with the GMC, the Medical Council of the UK. You need the registration with the GMC in order to be able to actually practice medicine within the UK. Luckily, because I graduated from a British medical school, I have that. Other students that do not graduate from a British medical school need to apply for that one. There are two main pathways to apply for it. The first one being you have to do your PLAB exams, which probably some of the students are familiar with. There's the PLAB 1 and PLAB 2. I think each one is around $800 or pounds, around that price. So when it comes to international medical graduates, yes, that is a significant expense. And also because you need to be in the UK to do your second PLAB. So that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. The second pathway to apply for a General Medical Council registration with the UK is having done either your US boards, i.e. your step 1, step 2, your Canadian boards, or your Australian boards. And in addition, you need to have done a year of internship, a year of actually working as a doctor. So those are the two ways that you can receive a GMC registration that would allow you to actually work as a doctor in the UK. So luckily I went to the easier pathway. That's the one that applies to me. And that's why the process for me was very smooth.
So to summarize what you said, if you are in a British medical school, then you are immediately GMC accredited, and you can apply directly to the UK. If you are graduating from a non-British medical school, there are two pathways. Either you do your PLAB exams, and the second one, you would have to travel over there and do it there, and then get GMC accredited, or you would have to be US, Canadian, or Australian accredited, and have done 1 year of internship elsewhere before you can get your GMC accreditation. Once you have that, you can apply, and it's an application fee applying for multiple programs, and not similar to the ERAS system in the US where you pay per program that you apply to.
Exactly, correct.
And how much is that fee?
The fee, no, it's for free. There's no fee to actually register.
There's no fee at all, so you can just register for free.
Yes. That's something that I was shocked at, since we always hear about the expenses that you need to apply to the US.
Right. So, and to Germany, when I did the Germany one too, there were a lot of expenses to apply to Germany too. Yeah. But okay, interesting.
I'm not complaining.
And Elie, do you want to ask the next question?
Definitely. So we all know there's a lot of differences between going to the US and going to the UK, especially, the whole exams and requirements. So if a person were to start planning for going to the UK, had they, already started working on their US requirements, how different would it be? So will they need to, start over, or have process new paperwork, or is it more or less there's a lot of common ground that they can just branch out and apply to the UK?
So unfortunately, there isn't a lot of common ground between both applications. So when I was working for both applications, I have to do them in parallel. Same with my medical school. So for example, the UK takes major emphasis on your medical school grades, something that the US residency application system does not, especially if you're an IMG. They don't really look at that. However, it's one of the major aspects of the UK application. So apart from that, there's also a different, let's say, a deed statement. Just like for the US application, you have the MSPE form that the school needs to provide you with. For the UK one, it's the dean statement that also needs to follow a specific format that is needed for the UK application. And you can also find that format online, just in case your school is not familiar with it. So there isn't really the same paperwork, nor the same exams, nor the same application system for both countries. So if you're looking into applying for both of them, you need to have them in parallel, have separate timelines for each, and be aware of what each one needs, because it's a completely different system for each one. Yeah.
And one more question, just to go back to the financials that I got, is the PLABs themselves. I'm sure you have to pay a fee to do them, right? Yeah. Do you know by any chance what that fee is? Or
I think it was around 800 for each exam.
Okay.
And I know that there are some courses as well online that are $1,000 or $2,000 to, if you want to study for that exams with those courses. Okay. But I think the courses are also done in the UK. So you must be in the UK if you want to attend those courses, right? Because they're not so widespread as the USMLE, let's say.
And does it help to go and do electives in the UK prior to applying?
Actually, the application does not ask you if you have ever rotated in the UK. So yes, you can go, you can see if you like the environment, if you like working at the hospital there, but technically speaking, it will neither benefit you nor harm your application if you go or if you do not go there.
Wow. So basically, how are you chosen? Let's say you went to an Oxford, right, university affiliated hospital. How are you chosen to go there? Is it based on your grades or just based on where the positions are open?
So also different than the US, the application system here is completely anonymous. They don't actually read application by application. The way that it works is that the United Kingdom Foundation Program Office, the UKFPO, they are the ones that receive all the applications from all the applicants. Every application gets assigned a point system, a point number, a score, let's say, that is based on your medical school grades, one of the ethics exams that you need to do, if you have 1 or 2 publications, if you have a previous degree, such as a bachelor, a master's, or a PhD. Taking all of those into account, the maximum number of points that you can have is 100. Based on that, based on the point that every person has to their application, the algorithm organizes us from highest score application to the lowest one. I think it's around 7,500 people that applied last year, for example. Now, at the same time in our application, we would have ranked the UK states in order of preference. So unlike the US, we don't apply to hospitals, we actually apply to states or to areas in the UK. The algorithm will then assign the first person in that list, will give them their first choice of state. The second person will also receive their first choice, the third person as well. Now, when the system comes to someone whose first choice is already full, they will be allocated to their second preference, and so on until all the spots are filled. Usually that's what happens instead of all the applicants have positions, unfortunately. So until all the spots are filled, that's what the algorithm does. So it's a different system as well than the US application.
So basically it's all objective measures, right? Like there's no subjectivity to the system at all.
It's all numbers.
You don't do interviews, you don't do any of this stuff.
No.
And basically one of the points, I guess, is if you graduated from a British medical school, does that give you more points, or is it just concurrent with what you get in your PLABs? I guess there's like an equivalency.
So that was actually what used to happen back in 2019 and before that. There used to be priority for the people applying with British medical degrees. However, after 2019, all the applicants have been pulled together. So there's actually no preference or priority to any group of applicants whatsoever. So yeah, and it's not only, so we know that in the US, it's not really stated that American medical graduates have priority over international medical graduates, but the numbers do indicate that they do. Last year, for example, American medical graduates, AMGs, had a 92% match rate, whereas IMGs had around a 55%, if I'm not mistaken. So there is obviously a preference in there, even if it's not stated explicitly in the application process. However, with the UK system, it's really an anonymous application and there's no preference to any group of applicants, regardless of your citizenship or medical school.
That is very interesting, actually. I'm learning quite a bit from you today.
I'm glad.
It's almost like they have a better system.
Exactly.
Violeta, I'd like to ask about postgraduate training after medical school. So you mentioned the foundation program. So for a person who's not well informed about the UK system, how is that different from, say, an intern year in residency? Does that include residency, or is it something before? What's the training like after graduating medical school?
So this is where it gets complicated now for the UK. So far, I think the UK had let's say, a more straightforward application than the US. But now this is where the situation flips. The UK postgraduate medical training is slightly different than the US one. So we know that in the US, you graduate from medical school, you're allowed to go into residency, and after that, you may or may not continue into a fellowship training. Now, when it comes to the UK, after graduating, you must do a foundation year 1 and foundation year 2. I think you wanted to say something. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. So you do a foundation year 1 and foundation year 2. That is if you graduated from a British medical school. Both foundation years are paid internship years that allow you to rotate at different specialties. You prioritize the specialties that perhaps you want, but there's no guarantee that you will receive them because obviously there's many applicants. For example, I prioritized internal medicine and surgery. Luckily, I happened to receive those for my foundation year 1. Now, this is something that is, let's say, a poor aspect for the UK for some applicants because they view it as, oh, I need to do 2 extra years before I can actually, let's say, enter internal medicine per se. However, I do think it has some positive aspects to it. I have noticed that doctors that have graduated from the UK have a really wide understanding of specialties beyond the one that they're actually working in, because they will probably have rotated in specialties that have nothing to do with what they actually specialized in, but they did those rotations at the beginning of their training. So they really have a very holistic view of many specialties. And that allows you, I think, to improve on your interdisciplinary skills, just knowing what the other person in another specialty might be facing, might be going through. And I think it's also a good way, in case you're not really sure of what specialty you like, you're not really sure what you want to go into, this is a really good way to explore different specialties because you're getting paid while doing so. You're working, you're already a doctor, and you're caring for patients, you're doing what you love. And so it can actually allow you to discover new things, to perhaps change the specialty that you were planning on applying to. Yeah.
And how many years is it? Let's say you do the 2 years, foundation 1, foundation 2, you decide on internal medicine or surgery. How many years of training do you have after that? Is it limited, or is it like just keep on training until something happens?
Well, so you have foundation year 1, foundation year 2, those are 2 years. After foundation year 2, some applicants perhaps choose to go into a research year or do a foundation year 3 to enhance their portfolio before applying to core training. With core training, which is 3 years, that's the equivalent to the US residency. That's when you finally declare your specialty, you apply to a specific specialty and hope you get in. And for example, let's use internal medicine as an example. That's where you would be specifically an internal medicine trainee, which lasts for 3 years. After that, you then apply for specialty training, which let's say you did internal medicine and then you want to continue into GI or cardiology, for example. That's the specialty that you'll be applying to as core training. That core training can last from 3-5 years because some of them actually also give you a subspecialty within it. So let's say you applied for neurology. At the end of it, you may do an extra year and you already have a subspecialty within stroke, for example. So it is a long process, but at the end of the day, the way I view it, for example, is you're working, you are stable, you're supposed to be doing what you love. So it works for me.
So basically, if you go into internal medicine and decide you want to do pulmonary medicine afterwards, that would be 5 years or
specialty training. Yeah.
So 2 more years of specialty training maybe after the first
so,
2 years in internal medicine.
Yeah, so every specialty actually has its very own unique pathway. And actually, I've been trying to click on each specialty because I want to try and find, let's say, a common ground to sort of explain it, and so that I can put it on my website, because I know that the UK postgraduate medical training, it's really complicated to understand. I'm starting in it next week, and I'm still discovering things in it because it's not as straightforward as residency and then fellowship. It's slightly more complicated. So I'm trying to find the simplest way to sort of graphically explain it, for example.
So we mentioned how the selection process is for foundation year. So for specialty, is it also the same process? Is it a point-based system? Or how is a person selected for the specialty he wants to go into?
So that's where things do change. In that case, it's more based on portfolio. For example, if you've done any research, if you've attended conferences within the specialty that you're applying to, if you have actually rotated in that specialty and what your mentors have written about you. So it becomes a more personal application.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are there also exams moving into specialty?
Yes. So you have the MRCP, which I think must be done before you apply for core training. So I'm also discovering what the path is.
Wow.
It's so complicated. Yeah.
So basically, first step is to get into core training. Second step is to get into your specialty of choice. While in the US, you get into your specialty of choice potentially up front. So that's why there might be a difference too in terms of you need to do interviews and stuff. Because it seems like when you want to go into core training, you need to know people, get letters of recommendation, and potentially do interviews to get into your core training. Correct. Excellent. So I was going to ask you a question about life in the UK, but it seems that you have not experienced it yet, so it might not be an appropriate question at this point.
I can give you my life from quarantine. I mean, actually, the process to get into the UK, visa-wise and paperwork-wise, is a little bit complicated, but I believe that is the case for many countries. But I do think the lifestyle here is very nice. And I've heard that from many of my friends here. And I think there is a better work-life balance here in the UK as opposed to the US. I think on average here, the work week is around 50 hours on average, whereas in the US, it can go up to 80 hours a week. So that is a big difference, I think, between both pathways. And you know, there are cities, it depends also where you want to apply to. If you want to be in a city like London, if you want to be more in the suburbs outside of a city, you know, there's a place for everyone, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so, so I think in this podcast, we were able to get from you the pathway to apply to the UK, both for the initial part of Foundation 1 and Foundation 2, and subsequently for the specialty training in the UK. Just one more question, and I think we should be good after that. It is, after you're done with your specialty training, you become an attending or a faculty, right? Depends. Yes. And how does the pay differ between like an attending and a trainee? Because here in the US, there's a big difference in pay when you go from training to becoming an attending or in private practice. I don't know if that's similar in the UK or not.
Well, here the pay does go up with every single year that you advance to. So even between Foundation Year 1 and Foundation Year 2, your pay does go up because your responsibilities go up. However, in general, the US doctors are better paid than UK doctors. So I think maybe that is also a selling point for the US. But for example, here, I believe some of the expenses are less. For example, healthcare expenses, if you were to need healthcare at any point. You have here the NHS, which, yes, it has its problems like any other place in the world, but it is a system that is being able to deliver results for its citizens. So pros and cons for everything, really.
Right. Yeah, thanks to both of you for being with us today on the podcast, and hopefully Violeta, you'll update us in the next couple of months about how you're adjusting to life there and training
Yes.
over there. And,
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to update everyone about you. And Elie, also thanks for being here. I think you're in Baltimore, I'm in DC, so we're not that far away from each other.
Yeah, just an hour away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm going to need you to get ready for a potential podcast about postdoctoral applications to the US.
Sure, I'd be glad.
I just put you on the spot now.
You can run.
I'd be more than happy. I guess my own application was put on the spot with all that's going on. So that should be fun.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye.